Welcome back to Next Stage Podcast, everybody. We got Damiano Christian coming in through Skype, or is it? I think it's Zoom, actually. He's zooming into our space here, and he's going to blow your mind with some incredible guitar playing, and then we're going to get to some conversation about it. So, Damiano Christian. Wow, you obviously just started playing today, right?
Yeah.
You're a quick study. I mean, I'll give you that. But damn, man, like, how did you start playing? What made you get into that kind of guitar playing? Because that's something that you don't hear very much these days. Like, what got you into playing that way?
What got me into playing that way was my father is a huge metalhead. So, like, growing up, he would be taking me to preschool, and we would be listening to the, what is that, Judas Priest live album with the brown cover with all the hands on the front. So we'd be listening to that, from that to Queensryche, Scorpions, Ozzy, Van Halen, everything. And then when I turned 11, I picked up the guitar, and it was all based off of me just taking my, what was that? I think I had the very first generation iPod Touch in 5th grade. And my dad put his library on it back when people used to use stuff like LimeWire. And there was I went down through the artists, clicked Ozzy Osbourne. And, like, I knew who Ozzy was, but I didn't know who Ozzy was. I knew Ozzy as, like, the Prince of Darkness from World of Warcraft and all that stuff. And there was a song on there called Revelation Mother Earth, Ozzy and this dude named Randy Rhoads. So I'm listening to that on the way to school, and it gets to the guitar solo at the very end of the song. And this is from the tribute album with Ozzy holding Randy up on the front of the album. And I got to the solo, and I'm sitting there on the bus, and I just, it was one of those moments where it just, like, it took me somewhere else. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? Because I had only been used to hearing stuff like Angus Young, all the AC/DC stuff, and Eddie Van Halen and Yngwie Malmsteen at the time. So, you know, I go to school, I get back on the bus, I put the song back on, I listen to it again, and then I get home, and we had like a little, one of those Fender Squier starter kit guitars with a practice amp. And my dad, and I wish I had it here, he had this, I think it was Guitar Hero magazine with Randy on the front with the white pinstripe Jackson. And it was, the whole magazine was about Randy, like the entire magazine. And they had tabs for about 5 songs, and Revelation Mother Earth was one of the songs. So basically it started with a mixture of my father and him introducing me to all the music he listened to growing up when he was my age. And just, you know, randomly hitting Ozzy Osbourne one day on the iPod when I was 11 and picking that one song because I was like, who the hell are these guys? And plus my dad's brother is a shred guitar player. So I used to go watch him play growing up with his bands as well. And that also made me want to pick up the guitar and be able to play like that. Being able to see someone do it live as well, like my uncle. And so yeah, it was a combination of all those things that got me into playing the way I play now. And, you know, just seeing, like, I'm sure you've seen like all the old videos of Eddie playing with Van Halen, and, you know, he would run over and jump up and kick the Marshall stacks and they would rock back and forth and stuff. So it was seeing all the stuff like that it was just really inspiring. And that's what made me want to play guitar. And I wish, you know, more people my age and people younger than me get that opportunity from their parents as well to, you know, this is what we grew up with, and hopefully you guys like it too. But yeah, that's how it all started.
Yeah, so you mentioned a few other guitar players in there. You said Angus Young, Eddie Van Halen. But what grabbed you about Randy Rhoads that made it like really crystallize?
So with Randy, it was all the classical music influence. So my first instrument's actually piano. I started piano at the Hartford Conservatory when I was 3 years old. And I went there for probably over 10 years before the school shut down, and they turned it into a private school for inner city kids in Hartford. So that's my musical background, is the 10 plus years of classical piano training. And for those 10 years, it was like strictly what I listened to was classical music from 3 till I was probably 10. And when I heard that being translated to guitar and rock and roll, I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. It takes the music that I, you know, studied for 10 years and the music I really love, which is rock. And it was like Randy put the two together. And I was like, wow, this is something really cool, especially when you listen to like the intro Diary of a Madman or You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, Mr. Crowley, all that stuff. It just really blew me away to hear somebody that influenced by classical music and put it to guitar. And then it was from there that I figured out who Ritchie Blackmore was. And then it was like, for me, it was always Randy and Ritchie, because they were the two that took the classical music and incorporated it into rock and metal. So that's what really set me on, you know, Randy's my hero, the guy that I'm going to look up to and shape my guitar playing from.
Yeah, and I can completely agree with that, because I am very much a fan and wannabe disciple of him. I just never had the dexterity to quite pull it off, and I gave up on that. Went to the blues because he can be sloppy and no one really cares. But yeah, he was classically trained from, I think, like the age of 4 or something. His mom was a classical musician. I actually was just as much of a Randy nerd. I bought this like book that was like signed by his mom and had an interview with her and like an interview with him on it, and this like outtakes sort of CD that came with it. So I know that he was steeped in that, and then went to see, I think it was David Bowie with Mick Ronson, and that made him realize, like, oh, here's what you can do with the guitar. So kind of a similar path to you. Like you got introduced into the classics and then saw like, that looks like a lot of fun on stage. I mean, is that what you felt?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember seeing the Randy Rhoads After Hours videos on YouTube, before Sharon took them all down. And I was watching Randy there with the white Les Paul, the white Marshall stacks, and I was like, that looks like fun compared to sitting at a piano for a 2-hour concert in a tuxedo and having to play Chopin Piano Concerto or Beethoven Piano Sonata, and the audience doesn't say a word. It's like you play in complete silence. So yeah, I was seeing Randy and all the people screaming and stuff. It really, really influenced me a lot. And it's funny you mentioned Randy and his mother, because, let's see, I was 16, and are you familiar with the Randy Rhoads Remembered show that Brian Tichy puts on?
No.
So every year at NAMM, they do the Bonzo Bash, and then they do the Gary Montrose Remembered show. So that's with the drummer Brian Tichy from Ozzy, and he now plays with Foreigner. And he got together with Randy's family and Rudy Sarzo, and they put together Randy Rhoads Remembered. I think it was 2016 for NAMM. And they did a big tribute Randy show. They had all these famous guys like Doug Aldrich, Jeff Loomis, Kiko Loureiro, Gus G. They would all come up and play their favorite Randy songs with Rudy Sarzo and Brian Tichy. And they would have Randy's brother Kelly, his sister Kathy there, and Dolores when she was still alive. So that first year they did it, they ended up making like a whole summer tour out of it and doing a tour of the East Coast. And I think they put out a contest because they wanted to have some local unknown person come up on stage and play with them. But the contest was submit a video of you playing Crazy Train, and we'll tell you like the week of who wins for each prospective show. And they played at Stafford Springs here in Connecticut. You know where Stafford Springs is, the racetrack?
No.
Yeah. So they played there, and I submitted. I think I was only 16. And that week I get a message from Brian Tichy at like 3 o'clock in the morning because he's in California. So they're 3 hours behind. I'm like half asleep, and I see my phone go off. Hey, this is Brian Tichy. Wanted to let you know you won the contest. Can you come and play with us on on Saturday? And I shit you not, I woke my whole family up like it was Christmas. I couldn't stop screaming. I'm like, holy shit, I'm gonna play with Rudy Sarzo, who shared the stage with Randy since he was in Quiet Riot. And then Brian, who's played with Ozzy. And then half of Randy's family, his brother, his sister, and his mother. So, yeah, I got to do that. Met Kelly. I ended up not meeting Kathy and Dolores because this was right around when Dolores started getting sick. So she was already in Connecticut, and they had to fly her back to California the day of the show. And then I think it was probably a year or two later she passed away. But, yeah, I met Kelly, played the show with them, with Rudy and Brian. And then I went to NAMM in January, and they ended up not doing the show because Brian was saying he didn't have time to do it. But I ended up, have you ever been to Musonia yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I'm sure you're probably aware that's the school that Randy's mom ran, and that's where Randy learned to play guitar and everything. That's like where all the Randy fans go for like their pilgrimage, and they get to go and see the room that Randy taught in and whatnot, and they still have everything set up the way it was the day Randy left to go play with Ozzy. So it's like you walk into that room, and there's the music stand that Randy used to teach kids on. The seat is, both the chairs are still there. Everything from the room is still there like it's 1980 and Randy just left to go record Blizzard of Oz. And yeah, it's like you walk in there and you're like, holy shit, this is where it all started. And I'm not sure if you heard, they had a break-in at the end of last year and someone came and stole a bunch of stuff from the school. Yeah, they have a bunch of stuff on display, like a bunch of big collages, pictures of Randy and stuff. They even have Randy's first electric guitar in there. It was a Harmony electric guitar. That got stolen and was never found. They even have they had one of the prototypes from when Marshall made the signature Randy Rhoads Whitehead. They had, I think it was prototype number 2. That got stolen, never returned. But they were able to find a bunch of the stuff, like a bunch of his mom's trumpets and whatnot, and a bunch of other Randy stuff. They found it in a dumpster behind a restaurant, probably like 10 minutes away. Like someone stole a bunch of the stuff, and then it went viral on Facebook, and Ozzy Osbourne said he would pay $20,000 if someone found the stuff and returned it. That all happened, and then so it's like someone took the stuff, it went viral, and then they dumped the stuff in a trash can.
That's just disgusting.
But no one ever found the. Yeah, I know, and they even they even stole Randy's PV half stack he used with Quiet Riot. That has the Quiet Riot logo spray painted on it and everything. They stole that. That got returned. So everything got returned except Randy's first guitar and the prototype Marshall head. And yeah. So
well, if somebody has those, they better keep it secret because they're going to get a beatdown from Ozzy probably. Well, probably not him personally because he probably can't do much, but, you know. That's a horrible story. But so you at the age of 16 getting to play at that show, like, and kind of feel that feeling of what you expected it. Was it like what you thought when you got on stage and played Randy's parts and stuff like that?
No, I'll be honest with you. I was terrified because you're sharing the stage with Rudy Sarzo, who grew up with Randy and played on those songs. Well, the tours with him. He didn't play a song. He played them live. And I remember we walked out onto the stage and Rudy stuck out his hand and he shook my hand. And all I could think of was like, you better not screw this up. Because I thought it was going to be a bunch of fun and that it was going to be, it ended up being something that was a lot more intimidating than I expected it to be. Because it was at that moment I realized like how diehard a lot of the Randy fans are. Especially when you have a theater packed with 450 of them, where they know every song, they know every solo, they could sing you every solo. And yeah, it was very nerve-wracking, especially when you have, two members of Ozzy Osbourne playing with you and Randy's family off the side of the stage watching you the whole time. It was not what I expected at all.
So kind of like a bittersweet dream come true. But when did you first feel, or have you first felt that like arrival moment when you were playing on stage and it felt like what you thought it was going to feel like?
That probably didn't happen until I was 19. And I ended up doing like my first big show was Sacred Oath, and we opened for Fate's Warning at the Webster in Hartford. And it was us, Fate's Warning, another band called Shaman's Harvest, I believe. And the promoter wanted to put Sacred Oath on with Fate's Warning because apparently I'm sure Rob's told you there's this connection between Sacred Oath and Fate's Warning that goes back to when they both started their bands. And that was like the first moment where it's like we walked up on the stage and they told us you only get a 25-minute set. And there was the Webster, and this was the main stage. The place was probably already half full, and we were the first band on. And I remember walking up on stage, and at this point, I'm like, I had never played a stage this big before. I was used to playing bars. And I remember going up on stage and then looking out into the audience and just seeing a sea of heads. And that's, we started playing the first song. I think the first song we did was New Religion off the 12 Bells record. And that's where I was like, okay, this is what I want to do and make a career out of it and hopefully be playing shows that are 3 times the size of this as my livelihood. So that was the moment where it all clicked and I was like, I'm going to do this no matter what.
So it was through Sacred Oath, playing with Rob in Sacred Oath. So how did you meet Rob and get involved in Sacred Oath? Because I took guitar lessons from Rob, and that's how I know him. And it's funny that we have that connection here, but he's a powerful force in the music scene around here. He's a dynamo of energy, and he's just energizing to be around. I love the guy. And so how did you get involved in Sacred Oath, and like what was that path?
So I was in, your average local 80s hair metal cover band. And I also had an original band on the side with my sister and another kid our age. I think we were only like 17 at the time. And we were doing our first EP with songs that I had written. And through there, we were working with this guy named Mike Z. Livingston, who has a record label called Ear One Productions here in Connecticut. And he was working with a guy named Jay Reason from Connecticut, who was working with Sony. And he had done a bunch of stuff. Who was the guy he did it with? I think there's some guy named Robert McKnight. He had done a bunch of stuff with him. And he's friends with Rob's guy at Sony, who does all the Sacred Oath records. I can't remember his name. But he was friends with Rob's guy at Sony, and they were recording the 12 Bells album. And Jay went with Rob's Sony contact to meet with Rob about the album. And Jay was trying to pitch doing the album artwork for Rob. So while they were talking, Rob mentioned they were auditioning guitar players because they wanted to have a third guitar player to go on tour with them to cover a lot of the stuff that's in the songs that you can't do with two guitar players. And at the same time, he was also looking for a guitar player who could also play keyboards, because a lot of the Sacred Oath songs, they have keyboards on it and no one's there to play them live when they play. So Jay told Rob, he's like, I know this kid from Middletown. His name's Damiano. He's an excellent guitar player, keyboard player, and he sings too. And I guess he showed Rob some of my stuff. Rob was interested and told my guy Jay at the time, give Damiano my phone number, tell him look up the band, look at a couple songs, and if he's interested, call me. And I got a call at work. I was at work, and Jay's telling me, I got this band for you. They're looking for a guitar player named Sacred Oath. They're called power. They're like power metal. And at the time, I kind of brushed it off because I thought power metal was going to be like the Cookie Monster screamo vocals. So I told him, I was like, okay, I'll think about it. It's not really my thing, but I'll take a listen to it. Because at the time, I was like, okay, you got power metal, you got death metal, you got black metal, and I'm like, to me, they all kind of start blending into each other and sound the same, especially with newer bands nowadays. So I looked them up at work, and then I saw the discography about how Crystal Vision came out in '86. That's the band started back then. And they had just put out Raven Song, that album. And I'm listening to the stuff, and I don't even remember what I listened to first. I want to say I listened to something off of Raven Song, and I heard Rob's voice. And I think Rob's voice is kind of what sealed the deal for me, because I was like, either this dude's going to scream or he's going to actually sing. And when I heard Rob sing, I was like, holy shit, this guy's fucking amazing. And then even the rest of the band too. And then I started pulling up stuff from like Crystal Vision, like Two Powers, Rising from the Grave, all the vintage Sacred Oath stuff. And when I heard Rob's voice back then, I'm sure you've heard the Crystal Vision album, how Rob sounded when he was 16 years old. And I was like, wow, very King Diamond-like vocals. And very, So I met with Rob, and we didn't get together probably until the following year. It was around February. And Rob sent me the 3 songs to come in and audition with. And I came in, played the 3 songs, and one of the songs I had to play keyboards as well. So I'm playing guitar, and then I'm like, oh shit, the keyboard part's coming up. I didn't rehearse this part. So I'm like, I'm still playing the guitar part. And I just put the pick in my mouth. I start playing keyboards with the other hand, and Rob looks at me. He's like, what the hell was he doing? And after we finished, Rob basically looked at the guys, and he looks at me and he says, he's like, if you want the gig, it's yours. Just off of me playing the 3 songs, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Because at this point I already listened to some of their stuff, and I really liked a lot of their stuff after listening to it. And that's how I got connected with Rob, was basically through doing my own album with another guy who was somehow connected with Rob through Sony with their distribution guy for all the Sacred Oath albums. And that's how I met Rob, and did my first tour with Rob when I think I had just turned 19. And we went to like Pennsylvania, Jersey, New York. And then we did the big Webster one, opening for Fate's Warning. And all those pictures on the front of that Thunder Underground album are from that show with Fate's Warning.
Man, that's like an incredible turn of events that you ended up playing with him, because he's the perfect person to be playing with, because he's carrying that metal torch still forward in this day and age, and probably that energy you talked about that grabbed you about the music, and hearing Randy taking the classics and bring it with his higher energy goes through with that. So what do you think that energy is that makes metal so important to those who get it and want it to keep going?
I mean, probably the nostalgia factor of it. If you go back to the 80s, late 70s, when Sabbath came out, and Deep Purple, and all throughout the 80s, and somewhat of the early 90s with Pantera and Megadeth, there's just there's a nostalgia factor of it, because I don't know what it is. It's something that, there's a lot of soul behind it. There's a lot of depth behind it. It's not like they just slap the stuff together and here we got a song in 5 minutes. And the other thing too is, I think back then is a time where guys would actually sit down as a band and write a song together. Whereas nowadays, a lot of bands, the guys will record and write their parts on their own. And they don't even get together as a band until after the album's finished. It's like, okay, now we got to rehearse the songs to go on tour. I think what's kept it alive during the years, luckily, has been people like Rob or people like my father, who they play that music for their kids. And they introduce them to it, and they influence them to it. Like I would talk with Rob, and I was asking him, because I don't know if you've probably met Rob's kids, right? Farrah, Rosie, and Rocco. Because I was asking him, I'm like, what do your kids listen to for music, considering they're in those environments which the music is predominantly either rap, pop, and now country? And he's telling me, basically, he's like, my kids listen to good music. They don't listen to the garbage stuff like rap. And he's like, I introduced them to all the music that I grew up with, and luckily they stayed kind of within that realm. I know both his daughters are big into musical theater, like he is, because I know he wrote two Broadway shows and recorded them, and his son's into all different types of music as well. So I think it's people like Rob and my father, who it's like, you know, raising people that way, that's kind of kept it going this long. But sadly, that percentage of people is very small of, you know, parents who grew up then introducing their kids to that kind of music. I probably only know 3 to 5 other people that I could mention who are my age, where their parents have done that as well. So
it's
yeah,
kind
it's
of like
where I think
a bit of like a, maybe, I don't want to say dying breed because that seems you know, defeatist, but maybe it's not as common anymore. But there is something about the energy that I think is universal. It's kind of like a carefully packaged form of aggression, whereas like punk and hardcore is a little more like straight ahead, boneheaded. But metal has the same aggressive feelings, but it's done in a tasteful way where it doesn't seem as, you know, like caveman like as the other types. So I think it does appeal to the intellectual side.
Yeah, like it's not as aggressive and it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not so much in your face like with the punk and the more like hardcore music. That's like very like the guttural stuff in your face, and whereas like you got a band like Megadeth, it's all very tastefully written out and composed together to where it's like you listen to a song like Holy Wars, it's like 3 songs within one song. And, you know, that's, and I kind of wish people would go back to that, you know, because it ends up influencing a bunch of guys like Eddie Van Halen did. Out of Eddie, you got 100 guitar players throughout the 80s because of one guy. But yeah, I know what you're saying, how it's like with, you know, the punk stuff, and the hardcore stuff, it's more aggressive, whereas the metal stuff, it's more tastefully done, so to speak. And that's what Rob does with all the Sacred Oath stuff. It's all very tastefully done. And like you listen to the new record when it comes out, there's not one bad song on it. There's not one song where I can sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to skip this song. It's one of those albums where it's like you can sit through every song and enjoy it. Kind of like when the first Van Halen albums came out, the first Ozzy albums came out, and people would actually be able to sit through the whole thing and enjoy every song. And that's what I like about being in Sacred Oath, is Rob's got a really good sense of how to write, how to not overwrite, and how to, you know, he keeps it very, he also knows how to keep it sounding very current and not, you know, the band doesn't sound dated. You know, he's got a good sense of how to make us sound like we're in 2020 and not Crystal Vision 1986 Sacred Oath. Like, there's a lot of songs on this new record where I listen to it and a lot of the guys in the band listen to it, and we feel it, and we start to feel like we're listening to a current band. Like, that's how good Rob was at writing all this stuff. And yeah, So
you think it sounds like the idea of metal being more of like an album-orientated music as opposed to like a single-orientated music, where you get the album, you're going to listen to it all the way through. Does that transcend to like other bands that you really dig, that you're like, I'm going to listen to their album, not just 1 or 2 songs?
Yeah, it does. Because I mean, I remember growing up, I would listen to Blizzard of Oz start to finish and not skip one song. Same with like Diary of a Madman or any of the Van Halen albums, or like the Deep Purple records and the Rainbow records. I mean, even like Yngwie Malmsteen stuff, like Rising Force, you know, and Def Leppard albums too. I mean, granted, these are bands that also had a lot of singles, But on the same token, you could sit through their whole album and not get bored. So I think that's the cool thing about the bands from back then is they were able to pull off both, where it's like, okay, we're Van Halen. We can put out You Really Got Me and Eruption and Ain't Talking About Love as 2 singles. They blow up, but the album blows up too, and everybody can list every song off the album because they're able to listen through the whole thing. And the other thing you got to remember too is bands back then, an album was only, 45 minutes long? At most, sometimes an hour. Bands nowadays, you listen to an album, it goes on for like an hour and a half. And then you start to lose the listener after a while when your songs also start becoming 5 minutes long, 6 minutes long, 7 minutes long, 8 minutes long. It's like, can't we just write a 4-minute song with a couple riffs anymore and call it a day?
Yeah, no, there's certainly something more to kind of dig into, appreciate when there's a good total album. But I have to ask, because you did audition for Rat via video. Like, what happened with that? What was that like? Because we saw the video, we watched it, and you slayed it. Like, you were amazing on it. Like, what the heck happened with that?
I put the video out there not as an audition, but as a way to get myself noticed, hopefully by the band. And I threw the line in there of, consider this my audition tape, mainly because of COVID, because I did the video and I put it up, and about a week later, I was watching the views on it. Next thing you know, I think on my Facebook, it's got 5,000 views. On my YouTube, it's got 7,000, close to 8,000 views. And everyone in the comments from Connecticut music scene would start tagging the guys in Rat on the Facebook video and on my Instagram video. And I was trying everything I could that I could possibly do just to even get an audition. All I cared about was getting an audition. I could care less if they said yes or no to me being in the band. I just wanted to get the audition. And I went through, I was like, I'm going to start pulling every avenue I can to where it's like, I'm emailing some guy that I haven't talked to in 4 years, like, hey, could you help me out here? And that guy ended up being Mark Weiss, the photographer for Ozzy Osbourne, who also did photos for Sacred Oath on the, I believe it's the self-titled album with Sacred Oath. That's the one with Counting Zeros on it. And Mark had done a photo shoot with me before I met Rob. And he was like, yeah, I know Piercy. I'm good friends with him. And I will email your video to him, and I'll let you know if he says anything. I don't hear anything back. I sent another email, and he's like, I'll send it to him again. Let me see if he says anything. Again, nothing. And this was back in April, and I just put the video out. And then I went directly to their manager, who's in California, and the only thing I got back from them was, we are under lockdown and not doing auditions until the governor there lifts the gathering ban. And this was right at the time that the bass player Juan Cruchet was doing an interview with Blabbermouth and saying they're looking to audition guitar players. So I was like, okay, if they're publicizing it, they must be auditioning people, COVID or not. And then the manager said no auditions. And fast forward to about last month, after hearing like literally nothing and getting nowhere with it, all the guys in the band have seen the video. Steven's seen it. Jordan Ziff has seen it. He actually left a comment on the video saying he really liked it. I know the drummer Pete Holmes saw it. I don't know if Juan saw it, but I know 3 out of 4 guys saw it. And I ended up connecting with a friend of mine, Chris McCarville from Dokken. He's the new bass player now. And he ended up putting me in touch with a guy named Jim Paitis, who I believe Christian works with. And I remember going to, So I was on my way to a rehearsal in New York with one of my tribute bands, and I'm getting stuff from Chris McCarville. He's saying, okay, you need to send me a headshot and only 4 things that you've done. Just leave it at 4. If you go over 4, they're not even going to look at you, and they're going to just throw it to the side. And he's like, this is what Jim wants, your headshot and 4 things you've done. So I sent that. And then the next day, I get a call from Chris. He tells me what him and Jim talked about. And the main concern was my age, being that I'm 22. And they were, the concern was that I had not had enough on the road, like, touring experience. And, I had provided to them that, I've done tours before, going out with Sacred Oath, going out with my Def Leppard tribute, Rock of Ages, all over the East Coast from Maine as far as Indiana and North Carolina, So I know what it's like to be on the road and, not get any sleep and being on a plane and all that stuff. And you basically, you fend for yourself. And that's kind of where it got left at until about a couple months later, Rat announced that, we're going to be ready with a new guitar player and a new album for 2021. So I contacted the manager and Jim, who Christian works with again. And the funny thing is, I don't think Jim remembered who I was because I got an email back from Jim saying, who are you? I don't think I know who you are. And I'm like, I was told that your friend who's the bass player in Dokken sent you my stuff and you sent my stuff to Stephen Piercy and Rat's manager. So I'm doing all this email stuff based off of what I was told Jim did. And then like later that day, Jim sends me another email. He's like, don't worry about it. I talked to the Rat's manager. You're all set. I want to call you tomorrow. And then when I talked with Jim on the phone, he told me about the whole conversation with the manager for Rat and everything, and sent me the conversation about what they're looking for a guitar player. And I met all the bullet points except for 2. And those were that I'm not over 30 years old and I don't live 4 hours within LA County.
No, that's pretty lame, man, because they were not 30 when they started that band. Come on now. Like, everybody in that band was 30 when they started. Come on.
Yeah, and they made an exception for Jordan, who's 27 and plays with Marty Friedman, which I understand. I mean, the kid plays with Marty Friedman, but he's not over 30. So, I mean, come on. If you can make an exception for him. And so that's what I was told, and I kind of just dropped it there because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to move out to California, especially when I have no career yet. I'm teaching at a music school here in Connecticut. How am I going to find a place to live and steady work out there, hoping that I get this audition with a band? It's just logistically it as well. It wasn't panning out even just to get an audition. So I was like, I was like, fuck it. Because then 2 days later, Stephen Piercy puts out a post saying that Rat's not doing a new album anymore for 2021 and that he's focusing on his solo project. So I'm like, okay, I dodged a bullet there with,
Yeah, I was going to say you dodged a bullet for sure.
Yeah, I would have loved to have done it. I would have loved to have played with them. I mean, considering I got posters of them on my freaking walls here since I was a teenager. And, you know, and from everyone in the industry telling me, you know, you got to be persistent. The squeaky wheel's the one that gets the oil and all that stuff. So, you know, I figured if I had done what everyone else had been doing, it would have worked. And then they slapped on that I had to be over 30. So that's what happened with the rat thing. And I guess the way Jim was able to turn it around was I found out that my girlfriend's aunt is Jim's daughter's guidance counselor at school. So my girlfriend's aunt talked to Jim after he sent the email saying, I'm not sure who you are. And, you know, Jim and I ended up talking on the phone about it, and he's a really cool guy. And then I got another email about a week and a half ago. He's like, hey, you want to be on this podcast? And I'm like, sure. Who's it for? And he introduced me to Christian.
Oh, and that's how you came here.
Yeah. So through the rat thing, I met Jim, and then through my girlfriend's aunt, I got to finally actually speak with Jim. And then through Jim, I met Christian. Through Christian, I ended up here. So
all one big wonderful circle. And if you were on tour with Rat, you would not have been able to talk to little old me in Gaylordsville, Connecticut. Oh man. So I think
the thing is, I would have made. Oh, I was gonna say I would have made I always try to make the time to talk to people, no matter what I'm doing, because you know the idea was there at the time of, okay, if I go and join Rat, what am I going to do about my 40 plus students that I've had for 3 years? And I'm like, you know what? If I ever go on tour, they have, you know, you have Skype, you have Zoom, sitting in the dressing room or in the tour bus, I could always teach lessons over Skype and, you know, still be in contact with my students and people while I'm on a tour.
Yeah, and that would be following in Randy's spirit, because he always took lessons when he was on tour, so you could do the reverse thing of give lessons on tour. So, dude, I think you got such a bright future. Your talent is off the charts. Like, I just saw some of the YouTube videos of you, you know, playing guitar and piano, which blew my mind as well. Like, you're only 22. It's insane that you're this good. I'm like, I want to quit music altogether. But forget about the whole Rat thing. You know, you've got so much ahead of you, and I would love to, you know, continue to stay in touch and find out what's going on with you. But do you have some songs that you wanted to, you know, play out at the end to kind of cap this episode off? I mean, this is like, you blew our minds on the intro, so it's like anything's gravy after that.
I definitely had in mind playing a Sacred Oath song. Sadly, it's not from the new record, but it is from the previous studio record titled 12 Bells. And it's the first song on the record called New Religion. And when we did the 12 Bells tour, we would always open with this song, and it would start with, I would do a little keyboard intro while Rob would go up to the mic and do his whole spiel, and then we would start the song, and the lights would come up and the smoke machines would go off. And we had this huge bell made out of styrofoam that Rob made with a couple guys from his, because he does that theater program with Aaron now for Bethel. So they made this huge bell with the Sacred Oath logo on the front of the bell, and has a huge crack up the middle of it. So this is a song we would always open with on the tour, and hopefully volume wise everything is all set to go. So this is New Religion from 12 Bells. Let me get my phone up. And we are good. Paradiso de tu cante
You can go listen to that. Where is that? Is that like on all the platforms and everything? People can look up the song.
Yeah, it's on iTunes, Spotify, everything.
Yeah, but seeing it done like in
Yeah.
person, like it gives you a glimpse into like what dexterity it takes to do that stuff. Because if you hear the song and people want to look up the original, hear it in full, you're getting a glimpse right now of like here's what your fingers have to do, and it's just like mind blowing to see it like done in person. So like incredible, man.
Oh yeah.
So like I guess in closing with this here, like do you have any things, because I know you're a teacher, you teach music, and you're talking about the inspiration you got from your dad and you know the older generations about the music you love. Any words you'd want to tell people who are thinking about going into playing music or who want to start playing to inspire them to, you know, do what you do?
What I would tell everyone is start off finding your hero. You know, every guy, back to Eddie and Randy, they both had their guitar heroes. Like with Eddie, it was Clapton and Jeff Beck and Blackmore. And with Randy, it was Nick. A lot of kids nowadays, they don't have a guitar hero to look up to for inspiration, motivation, or influence. You know, guys did back then, or like the spare few guys who are my age. You know, the kids nowadays, they don't have that luxury of being able to have a guitar hero that makes them want to learn to play the guitar. So that's what I would start off by telling everyone is, you know, find a guy you really like, you know, where you really like his playing or her playing, and you really like their music and their chops, you know, and make that person your hero and the reason why you want to play and get good at whatever instrument it is you pick up, whether it's guitar, bass, drums, singing, piano. And the other side of it is, you know, be prepared to, if you want to do something with it and you want to see results, be prepared to be very dedicated to it, and you have to put your all into it. You know, it's not one of those things where you can half-ass it or be half in the door and half out the door on it. It's one of those things where it's like, either I want to do this and I'm going to make this my passion and get good at it, or you're not going to make any progress, you know, trying to learn the instrument. You know, and that's the thing I see with a lot of students. A lot of students will come in thinking that it's going to just happen overnight and that they're going to become this monstrous guitar or piano player just by me waving a wand over their head one lesson. You know, and I tell all the students, I'm like, me personally didn't get to the level I'm at within just a couple weeks, a month, or a year. It takes time to develop any craft that you do. You know, especially with an instrument, it takes time to develop your voice on the guitar or your instrument. That's another thing too. A lot of guys back then had their own sound and had their own voice. Like you could listen to a Van Halen record and know it's Eddie Van Halen. You could listen to an Ozzy record and know it's Randy Rhoads. You could listen to an Yngwie record and know, okay, that's Yngwie Malmsteen. You don't have a lot of that nowadays where you could pick up a record and say, I know who that is on guitar. So that's what I would tell all the kids, you know, find a hero, find an inspiration, and be ready to just put your heart, your soul, and your 100% into it if you want to succeed at, you know, being a musician and playing an instrument. Because it doesn't just happen overnight, and it takes a lot of hard work, practice, and dedication. You know, I also tell my students, I'm like, when I was your age, I used to just sit on my bed with my guitar, you know, and I would be trying to learn like something like, you know, I'm the One by Van Halen with the really hard swing riff to it. And I would just sit there for hours and try to figure it out because I was like, I was like, I want to do this. So I was going to do anything I could to master the instrument. And that's the mentality that you have to have going into picking up an instrument, is that, this is something, you want to do. Otherwise, that's why a lot of kids, they don't see the success they want out of an instrument. They think it's going to be like sports or something. You just pick it up like that and you can play. And sadly, it's not. This thing's got 6 strings and 24 frets on it, and you got to know how everything gets pieced together if you want to make it work the right way. So that's what I have to say.
Sounds like inspiration, dedication, and of course, perspiration.
Yep, exactly.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. Really great interview. You've gone through so much so far in only being 22, and I look forward to a bright future. Your talent is undeniable. I'm so excited that you exist and you're carrying this torch forward. Thanks for making the time to do this. Hopefully we get you on again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Definitely.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in and watching and listening if you're listening. And we'll check you out again sometime soon. Why don't you play us out a little bit of a gnarly riff after my chime here? Play us out. Awesome, dude. That's a wrap.